Hello and welcome to Hawk Nation, Hawkeye Nation, that is. This is Hawkcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Go Iowa Awesome and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by publisher Adam Jacoby and managing editor Ross Binder here on this recap. Iowa with the 20-13 win over cross-state in-state rival, in-state, not cross-state, in-state rival, Iowa State this evening, taking home the CyHawk trophy with their sixth straight win in Ames, and feeling pretty good about it. If you are able to watch our post-game pressers available on my YouTube channel, as well as a little bit on TV or on my Twitter page, man, struggling to start the podcast this evening. Anyway, took the win. Adam, you and I are there, or were there. Just general initial takeaways from the victory tonight for Iowa.
It was pretty obvious that this was a win that meant a whole lot to these guys. They downplayed it during the week for obvious reasons, for bulletin board reasons. But seeing the looks on these guys' face, obviously the aspect of Kirk winning his 200th game meant a whole lot to these guys. But even if it were win number 136, the fact that they got to get this win, Cade McNamara got to experience this type of rivalry. Joe Evans had that ability to finish his career, as an Ames native, to finish his career with a win at Iowa State. You can just tell how much the moment mattered to these guys. It came across after the game. It came across while we were watching them. There was just a little bit of extra celebration, a little bit of extra juice into everything that they were doing. And, if that is the manifestation of everything that has motivated them throughout the week, and this is how it all comes out, I would say that's a very, very satisfying win for everybody on this team, and something that they're probably going to look back on fondly once the season, or at the very least, the regular season is over.
Ross, how about you, sir?
Yeah, I mean, you guys had the Ames perspective on the game, so you could see, what they, especially the post game, their reactions and everything. But I was watching it on TV, and I just felt like watching the game and seeing the way the guys were playing. Especially, I thought some of the in-state guys like Joe Evans, Cooper DeJean, Ethan Herkett, huge tackle at the end of the game there. Like, there was just an extra oomph in what they were doing today, and they really wanted this one. I think losing last year in Iowa City and that debacle of a 10-7 slog, no, that didn't sit well with anybody. So I think they wanted to avenge that. And then Kirk's 200th win, I'm sure, was a little bit of incentive. But, I just think they just don't like losing to Iowa State. So they did not want to have that happen again. And especially for a guy like Joe Evans, he's been here 6 years. He's been a part of a lot of wins over Iowa State, but it would probably, it would sting a little if his last game against them ended up being a loss. So, he really seemed determined not to let that happen. And Cooper was just flying around today. So
one player, before we get to Cooper, that I thought really brought some extra oomph today, and I think you guys will agree with me, Jaz Patterson. First of all, the 59-yard scamper, if you will, in the first quarter, and secondarily, just the short runs and the pop that he brings. We've talked a little bit about Jaz Patterson on the pod. We've got some articles about him. I think I may have hit on him briefly in a Caleb Johnson piece after Media Day, but we finally saw it come to fruition. Yeah, 59 yards is a good chunk of what he put forth today out of his 86. 10 attempts. I think, Caleb Johnson still got a majority of the carries with 15. I think he only had 28 yards, though. So Jaz Patterson really, I think down the stretch kind of became the bell cow a little bit for the Iowa offense today as well, running the ball And that's a big highlight for this team going forward. I mean, based on what we saw today in terms of production, we could see him being that number 2 back instead of LaShawn Williams, especially if you're going to be putting it on the ground quite a bit. I think LaShawn Williams is a little bit more effective in the open field, i.e., hitting him in the flat on a passing play. But Jazz was really, really solid during this game, and I think that's a serious indication as to who he is as a player, and it got to be exciting for Iowa fans to see some of that work and some of that potential that we've seen flash really pop today.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, I agree, Eliot. I thought Jazz was looking really. The violence he was running with today was what really stood out to me. He was just hitting the hole, just really, smashing into guys, and he was very decisive when he got the ball. There was no thinking, there was no dancing. There was hit ball, and run, hit the hole, run, hit somebody, run, and I think that's what you want to see. That's what this offense needs at the running back position. It doesn't. Doesn't need anyone who's dancing behind the line. That's not going to work. And what he was doing was very effective today. I mean, like you said, the 59-yard run, that was a lot of his overall production. But he had other good runs as well. There were some runs in the fourth quarter where they were using him, and Hayden Large was blocking for him, and they were eating up 4, 5, 6 yards a pop there for a short while. And of course, he had the offensive touchdown, which was a nicely blocked play too that he executed well, shooting through the hole into the end zone. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It does feel like Iowa is rotating running backs a lot. You get a few plays with Caleb, and then Jazz comes in, or you get LaShawn, and what do you think about that, Adam? Do you think they need to stick with the running back a little bit more consistently, or is this kind of the way it's going to be all year?
One sec, guys. I'll mark this. Ross, will you pull your mic a little bit closer to your mouth? Was he kind of going in and out for you there, Adam?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, which is fine.
Will you just? I'll mark it. Will you just? Do we test 1, 2 here for us, Ross?
Hello.
Perfect.
There, that's better. Cool.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. I'll start in here. One more thing that I want to point. We'll cut that one because I'm not actually answering the question as you asked it. All right. I think you're right. And I'll also point out that the sort of winning plays that Patterson was making weren't just about carrying the ball. Eliot, you mentioned to Patterson after the game, there was one play where McNamara was facing a little bit of pressure, a little bit of trouble. ISU had 2 guys free, and Patterson found a way to block both of them by essentially throwing his body at them on pass pro without it turning into a tripping penalty, right? Because there's a way to really mess that up too. Found a way to not do that, found a way to get 2 guys off their feet, and it ended up facilitating a big first down completion for the Iowa offense. So his ability to make those plays even when he doesn't have the ball in his hand, I think is going to go a pretty long way in terms of solidifying or even shortening that rotation at running back if they think that, it's better served as Caleb Johnson and Jaz Patterson, and, find different ways to use LaShawn, whether it's a different role, different situations, or very specific situations. But like I said in the thread during the game, if he keeps making plays like that, it is really, really hard to make a case to keep him off the field. And that was early in the game too. And he didn't do anything to sort of play his way off over the course of that game. And for somebody that young in a position that's that competitive, boy, that really opened my eyes in a way that I was not expecting when that game kicked off.
Yeah, the double block. He did it on purpose. Breaking news. And we got that quote directly from him. You can check it out on my Twitter page at Eliot Clough. I quoted that video that was going all over Twitter, and he said verbatim, "Yeah, I did that on purpose." And I just genuinely thought it was oh crap, missing my guy. I fall over, other dude trips, but no, he 100% did that on purpose. And before we move on to another point from the game, Ross, one thing you said is that this offense needs a running back that will just hit the hole. And that is something that I said to Adam during the game about Caleb Johnson. I would love to see him have a little bit more of that aggression that Jaz Patterson has in the run game, because Caleb has the breakaway speed for sure, the playmaking ability. If he just hits the hole, like this offense is designed for running backs, if he hits the hole, he makes so many more plays. I don't know if this is like him in his head trying to make more plays, viewing himself as this star running back that he is, and is not doing the simple things. But this is something that I've seen, and like I said, I did point out to Adam during the game, and would like to see more from him, and I think will make him more productive. Now, on to a little bit more from this win for the Hawkeyes, 20-13 over the Cyclones. Another big play, another big player today, Sebastian Castro. He had that pick six. I believe it was in the second quarter. And what he said post game was that it appeared like it was in slow motion to him. And I can tell you why, is because he was on the opposite side of the field. Rocco Becht had to throw across his body to the far side. And Sebastian essentially could walk forward, catch the ball, run into the end zone. That one made it 17-0, I think, at that point. Yeah, 17-0. And Brian's 25 points per game at that point in time was looking pretty good. We'll talk more about the second half in a second. But Sebastian, that was a really big play at a really big time that ultimately ended up being the separation for the victory in this one.
Yeah, I thought it was a real turning point of the game, especially because it came so quickly after that interception that Iowa State got on McNamara. And it was a little bit of a ball don't lie situation. And it's easy for us to say that, but Cade McNamara said that himself in the post-game conference. And, you know, it was good defense. And I'm saying that with all the Matt Foley air quotes, because it at best, it was a 50-50 call or non-call on pass interference. And credit to the Iowa defense for, instead of saying, well, things aren't going our way, blah, 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 turning that into an opportunity to get that score on the board themselves. And yeah, it sure looked like an easy interception and touchdown the other way. I would say the easiest part was that absolutely after the ball was in Castro's hands. But I thought it was a little bit interesting that Ferentz said after the game that Castro last season probably doesn't make that play. And that might just be a matter of him having that recognition to get in that position to begin with. It might be the fact that he was making that read for Iowa State, you know, switching formations and therefore switching the read that he had to work off of. We're going to try to find out a little bit more about that. We asked a little bit and got a little bit of answers in terms of what Castro was saying and what he was working on in the post game. And this is just me being a little bit of a nerd, but I really, really want to press in on that play in particular and learn not only, you know, what precisely Castro was keying on and all of that, but, you know, why wouldn't he have made that play? Because to us unwashed savages watching the game, it looked like one of the easiest touchdowns of Castro's life. So there's more to it than that, obviously, and I'm curious to hear more. Ross, what did you think of that play and what it meant to the game, especially?
Well, I mean, as far as the game, I think that felt. I mean, I don't. You don't want to say that a 17-point lead is insurmountable, especially in the second quarter. But with Iowa's defense, it kind of is. Especially with the way the Iowa State offense was looking, which did not really look like they were likely to score, over 17 points in that game. So, when Iowa goes up 17-0, you feel really good about that game, and Iowa's odds of getting the win and getting out of there with the CyHawk. As far as the play, I would certainly like to hear more about what exactly Castro was reading. I wonder if it was just a matter of he's done a lot more film study since last year. He's a lot more comfortable in the position, the cash position. A lot better at reading the game. But it'd be interesting if you saw something in film study about Beck that he was able to apply to that particular play. But yeah, it was I thought a great play. He read it perfectly. He got the ball, and once he got the ball, it was easy street from there. He just had to walk into the end zone basically.
As we're talking about defense here, two names that have already been brought up that you referenced, Ross. Cooper DeJean, Joe Evans. Joe Evans lived in the backfield today, and he popped Rocco Beck every single time he got the opportunity. I don't think any roughing the passer calls. I can almost guarantee that there weren't any, so they were letting them play. Cooper, you can very clearly tell that he watched the film going into this one because he was reading plays like a book. And last week, we didn't see much of Cooper. I think it was largely because Utah State just didn't go to that side of the field, which fair enough. I wouldn't either. But Cooper was moving around a little bit more this time. He had a little bit more freedom to work defensively, and he just appeared. And like, it's not like he didn't look confident last week. I mean, the dude is AP preseason All-American. It just looked like he hit a different gear to a degree in the way he was playing, and he hit that flow state where you're just in it. You're making plays, and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Yeah, I thought this was a very, very strong performance for DeJean, and the numbers bear it out. Led the team in tackles, 10 tackles, which he doesn't do that very often, especially when quarterbacks are trying to make an effort not to throw at him. But, 6 of those are solo tackles, and we saw him generate those hits, those stops based on those pre-snap looks, like you said, flying around the field, making plays because he had done that preparation to begin with. Also, half of the tackle for loss with Kyler Fisher, credited with one of Iowa's 7 pass breakups, which, wow. For a guy who also sort of stakes his reputation as a returner as well as a defensive back, he's been a little bit quiet as a returner so far, but he has been lights out at cornerback. And it's a little nice reminder that the returner gets to score points. The defensive back, he had 3 pick sixes last year, probably not going to have that many opportunities to
I was going to say 5 pick sixes. He had 5 picks and 3 pick sixes.
Yeah.
That's my mistake. Brain fart. Sorry. Go ahead.
He's probably, we'll say this. If he gets 3 pick sixes again this year, start building the statue, right? Like that is, there's a whole lot that has to go into that is sort of out of his control. So, and likewise, being a punt returner, being a kick returner, one, Iowa's just got so many options at kick returner, but 2, teams know better than to give him very returnable balls if they have any say in the matter. So those flashy stats might fall off, but if he keeps performing at this level, which includes that preparation, that athleticism, that recognition of what the other team's trying to do, oh my goodness, All-American's a good start as far as recognition goes. Yeah, that was a super impressive performance by him. And leading the team in tackles, he will get some recognition for it. Even if he only had 2 or 3 tackles, I would say that was a lights out game. Russ, did that come through on TV too?
100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, Cooper was a real standout. I mean, like he was just flying around, always at the ball. You know, the thing that stood out to me, you mentioned that he led the team with 10 tackles. You know, I think in a lot of circumstances, your defensive back, cornerback leading the team in tackles, maybe not a good thing. You know, if they're getting all those tackles 10, 15 yards down the field, that's not good. You know, the offense is having a lot of success and he's just, you know, mopping up. But, you know, thinking about Cooper's tackles today, how many of them were at or right pretty close to the line of scrimmage, you know, or, you know, getting guys immediately after they caught the ball? There were not many cases where a guy made 8, 10, 12 yards and then Cooper, you know, got the tackle. There were so many where he was getting him just immediately right when he got the ball, and then, you know, often right at the line of scrimmage as well.
Yeah, he was very rarely running the wrong direction. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And on top of all of that, probably should have had an interception. Shout out to Xavier Wampa. The way he explained it after the game was he left his guy, X was doing the right thing, and they just happened to run it into each other. So just a discombobulated play there for him and X on the defensive side of things. One additional encouraging thing for Iowa fans, you know, I mentioned Jaz Patterson having a great game. Run blocking was better as well. And a third point to that is Iowa definitely left points on the board again. Now, that can be encouraging or discouraging depending on how you frame it. You don't want it to become a habit, but there are throws that Cade probably makes more often than not that he just missed today. He underthrew Deontay Vines on a go route. He overthrew Seth Anderson on I think it was a go route as well. And there was that one play in the end zone where Iowa walked away with a field goal, but 2 receivers ran into each other. Not only did they run into each other, but he had Hayden Large for the easy first down with 2 to go. And who knows if they score after that as well. So points left on the board by the offense. Does it become a theme? Well, hopefully not for them and their production and for Brian Ferentz's mental health. But this is 2 straight games where they probably could have had 30-plus points if they just capitalize when these opportunities are presented to them.
Yeah, and as the coaches see it, that is more encouraging than last year or the year prior, where it was pretty clear that there was personnel on the offense that just was not going to be able to get them in positions to succeed. You know, they start week 1 with 1 scholarship receiver healthy. That's a situation where, you know, you can call whatever play you want, but it's sort of like, good luck. This year, they're close, and you still want them executing at. You still want them actually successfully executing the plays, and for them to be close and miss on those opportunities. We'll say it. It's easier for the coaches to stomach that when Iowa's 2-0 than if they're 1-1 or even worse than that. So a lot of coachable opportunities, and we sort of heard that from Ferentz after the game. But it was pretty obvious where those opportunities are going to be. And it also sort of seems like the team is capable of turning those opportunities into points or first downs or what have you. You know, they don't look inept. They don't look like they're not all on the same page per se, although that aspect doesn't look perfect, but it also doesn't look like last season. So you see how it can be encouraging even while Iowa's only scoring 20 points and this game ends up being a 7-point game when really Iowa was out competing Iowa State really pretty substantially for the last, we'll say, 55 minutes of the game, and was up by 17 points and had earned their way up by 17 points. So when Ferentz says that this team is close, when McNamara says that, they're close, but they both acknowledge that there's plays or there's points sort of being left out on the field, that's what they mean, and it makes sense. And it's sort of up to them, whether that's the coaches, the players, the ones who are trying to execute, whether that, like you said, turns into a theme, or if it turns into a get those mistakes out of the way in early September, then by October and November, you're really running out of gear that you didn't have in the non-conference schedule. This could go either one of those ways, and we've seen Iowa teams go either one of those ways in the past, and not even in the distant past too. So a little bit of a precipice point here, and it's really going to be up to the coaches to get those guys in position to succeed, and then it's up to the players to succeed, right?
Yeah, I agree. I thought there were definitely some, makeable plays there that weren't made. Ultimately the offense is going to be judged on the plays that it actually makes. And in this case, there were enough, but it was closer than we'd want it to be. I think the other thing that stood out to me from this game, yes, there were a few big plays that they missed on that could have, really made things a lot more comfortable in the fourth quarter, helped Cade's stats, helped Brian's contract stats. But the other thing that popped out to me was, I think there were 5 or 6 3 and outs in the game most of them all of them after the first quarter. And, that I think is still an area of concern. You want to see a little bit more consistency from the offense. Eliot mentioned the improved run blocking. Absolutely. There were some really well blocked plays in the run game in this game. There were also some that didn't work. And, you're going to have some that don't work, but, there were some just negative yardage plays, short yardage plays. And, they need to really keep working on that and really limit those. If they can do that, maybe those 3 and outs go away and they're able to string together some longer drives. Without that, it feels like they're, awfully dependent on those big plays hitting. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing for the Iowa offense this year. What do you guys think?
Well, to quote myself from the show notes, the offense still can't do jack squat after the first half. And what do we attribute that to? Is it Brian scripting things well in these first few possessions, and then he just winging it? Like what's going on here? Is it? I mean, that's really the only thing I can think of is these scripted plays are based off film. You're good to go. You're taking advantage of the defense, and then the defense gets a good look at you after halftime, and you can't expose those same things as you did in the first half. I mean, especially against a defensive coordinator like Tom Haycock, who's arguably one of the best, if not definitely one of the best in the country. And so is it solely based on the fact that you can't adjust in game? I think that's going to bear itself out more as we go forward. But that's what it looks like in these first 2 games against Utah State and then, of course, against Iowa State today.
Well, I think you're onto something. But I will say in that third quarter, the one good drive they had, ended with the field goal, could have been 7 if, the guys don't run into each other in the end zone probably. But that drive was one they actually moved down the field. I think it was an 11-play, 69-yard drive. And what stood out to me in that drive, especially looking back at it when I was writing up the recap and everything, was that Iowa mixed tendencies in that drive. So they ran the ball on first down twice. They passed it twice on first down. They used that 5 wide empty backfield look on 4 plays, which were all 4 completed passes by Cade on top of that. So when they actually didn't stick to some of the very familiar and predictable play calling and formations, I think the offense actually, showed some sparks of life that we didn't see otherwise. So I'm interested to see, do they try to build on that? I don't know, but what did you notice, Adam?
Yeah, I noticed the exact same thing, Ross. Especially when the offense would bog down, there were even people in the press box saying, "Oh, here's the 2nd and 10 run." Here it was, and obviously it's one thing to say, "Oh, here comes a run." It's another thing to say, "Oh, they're probably going to go, C gap and et cetera." So, like, it wasn't that level of predicting what I was going to do, but the larger macro tendencies of, well, if it's 2nd and 10, then here's where we run. This has also been its own sort of theme. And when the play calling is to some extent predictable, it sort of takes a little bit of wind out of the sails of you just got to go out there and execute. A little harder to execute when the defense has a pretty good sense of what's coming, and all of a sudden you're trying to run into a 9-man box. You're trying to, if nobody's going to be caught off guard by a draw play, why are you running a draw play, right? Because structurally, schematically, though, it depends on a defense thinking the handoff isn't coming. So in terms of diversifying what that play calling looks like, absolutely, Ross, I fully agree that needs to be a large component of where Iowa goes from here. But it's also sort of against that Ferentz mindset of, dance with who brung you. And look, 200 wins, there's only so much complaining we can do about that. So he's got his way. It's worked 200 times. But yeah, I absolutely 100% agree that when that defense is on its heels, when it is forced to react instead of sort of dictating the way or understanding the way that the circumstances dictate Iowa's play calls, completely different dynamic. And all of a sudden that Iowa offense looks to magically unstick itself. And really it's just a matter of going where the defense ain't.
Now, on that note, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think a wide receiver had a catch in the first half.
Not in the first half, no. And yeah, one, that's a problem. Two, I think the only target a wide receiver had in the first half was the throw to Caleb Brown that got swatted at the line by the defensive end linebacker, whoever that was. Like, that's it. And look, say what you will about Iowa's tight end room, which is clearly a favorite and a strength for the team, but there does need to be some diversifying of that aspect of the attack. And to their credit, they, took more of those shots in the second half, but woof.
Man, throw a screen pass to Caleb Brown. Get the ball in his hands. He doesn't have a catch yet. 2 games in. Yeah. He's a playmaker. You want to get your playmakers the ball. Yeah. Throw a screen pass to Seth Anderson, for all I care, to LaShawn Williams. I don't think I've seen a screen pass yet, other than to that delayed under that we saw. It was that fake end around or the sweep to Weechen, and then he dumped it under to Eric Hall, which faked us out. But it was a 3-yard gain. It was a 3-yard gain. So what does that do for you? 5-yard gain?
Come on, let's
whoop-de-doo.
I think, was that the 5-yard gain where all like carried guys like for 4 of the yards too, I think. So
that's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Bingo. So I think you gotta scheme a way to get the ball in the receiver's hands. Deontay Vines, I think, had his first catch today of the season. Didn't have a catch in that first game. And I mean, credit where credit's due. There are just a couple plays where Cade missed throws. So I think it's there at least to a degree schematically, but design something. Do something for Caleb Brown here. You brought him in for a reason. Get him the ball.
Yeah. He's young though.
Yeah, and yeah. I think You just can't run like, 2 plays on offense for Caleb Brown or whatever. Like, you need a little bit more than that. I know Iowa's not going to have the wide open offense. That's not going to happen. But, if Caleb's got like 2 shots to make an impact in a game, that's pretty tough.
That's a player just based on history of personality for wide receivers, where you can see him getting a little frustrated as the season goes on. Now, I don't know Caleb. I don't think any of us really know Caleb well enough, but I think he'd be justified in that. I don't have any sources on that or whatever, but I think he'd be justified in having a bit of frustration from a lack of production. So it is late here on Saturday evening, so we will wrap it up. Long day for Adam and I. We've been going at it for a little over 12 hours, and Ross doing a bunch of great stuff for us on the site and on socials throughout the day as well. Go give us a follow on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go Iowa Awesome on all of those platforms. Iowa Awesome on Twitter and Instagram's Go Iowa Awesome. But give us a follow as well at Adam_Jacoby. At Ross WB on Twitter. I am Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter. Don't forget as well, subscribe wherever you are listening to the podcast, whether that be YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out a lot, gets the podcast a little bit more exposure. Leave a question there with a 5-star review if you would. That all makes us very happy. That makes sure you don't miss an episode as well. If you're not a premium subscriber on iowa.rivals.com, you can do that at iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. Get great premium content from us, all the recruiting, basketball, and football info. Not quite basketball yet, but we're getting there. So once again, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. And for now, we'll see you next time.